Welcome back to RMC Bike Refurb. I'm excited to carry on with this Z550, which hasn't been registered on the road since about 1995. It's not hard to tell when you look at the rust and the corrosion on these wheels. So before we get started into those, I want to remove the front discs, and then we'll throw them in the car and go down the road and get the tyres off too. I hear everybody on YouTube talking about riding the Trail of the Dragon or the Alps or the Amalfi Coast, like you need to fly across the world to find a decent corner, but if you actually ride, if you ride every weekend, you know the best road is always the one 20 minutes away from the house. This is part of my local loop and it's by no means perfect. There's tar snakes and gravel patches in the spring and farmers pulling out of hidden driveways, but that's exactly why it's good. It sort of keeps you honest. It can go from wide open sweepers where you actually settle into your rhythm. Once you get the tyres warmed, you find your visual markers and just let the bike breathe, to tight and technical where it becomes like a game of vision. You're just looking through blind corners and managing your brakes and trailing them right to the apex. And sometimes if you mess up your line of entry, you mess up the next 3 corners, and it just forces you to be a bit more precise. There is one specific section here. It's over a crest and a quick left, then a flick right, and if you get it just spot on, the suspension unloads and the bars just get light in your hands. Sure, you wouldn't get that sitting in the house on the couch. By the time I get to this stretch, I'm usually buzzing, the hands are tingling a bit, and the tyres are really hot, and the bike's ticking as it cools down. So I don't really need to pack panniers for a 3-week tour. I just need some fuel in the tank and this stretch of road, that's it. Why not drop a comment below and say a bit about your local roads and what makes them personal to you? It'd be really interesting to hear that. Right, so we're back with the wheels minus the tyres, and before we get started into them, I want to get whatever this sticky gunk is off them first. These wheels have a polished outer rim, and wet blasting wasn't really an option because I didn't want to damage that. I'll remove the wheel bearings and then we'll attack the rest of the powder coating with some industrial acetone. So I've heard stories of people getting this wrong, and it's quite simple really. You tap your first bearing all the way home. Then you flip your wheel over. Don't forget to put your inner sleeve in. And then when it comes to the second bearing, use the setter just to tap the bearing down very gradually until you feel a slight resistance between the inner bearing and the sleeve. If you feel too much resistance, you've probably went too far, and this in turn will wear the bearing out really quickly. So just be careful and take your time. I want the line between the inner part of the rim and the polished outer part to be perfect. So I'm just taking my time with the masking tape here, and I need to be fairly meticulous. Once I do that, I'll mask the rest of the wheel and then the painting process can begin. It's been a few days and the paint has fully cured, so it's time to pay the tire fitters another visit. Here's the rims with the tyres on. The brake discs were in spec, so I tidied those up, threw them on, and in my opinion it all looks great. I'm just throwing this stem nut on roughly for now, but I will tension it properly and add the lock nut before the top clamp goes on. I'll just get rid of this layer of dust. It feels like they were painted so long ago. So between the front forks on the Kawasaki Z, there is an air balance pipe. What it is basically is the shocks are backed up with air as well as suspension fluid. You can see the small hole on the back of the stanchion. Well, the air pipe must cover that. According to the manual, each fork, it's about 280 mils of 10 weight suspension fluid. After you add the fluid, just work the fork leg up and down a bit. You want to make sure that all the fluid is circulating around the internal parts of the fork, and do that before you fit the springs. If you look, you'll see a tightly wound coil at one end of the spring. These are progressive springs, and you just want to make sure that that part goes to the bottom. And the manual calls for moly grease around these bearings, so I'll grease those up before I fit them into the swing arm. Before I fit the swing arm, I'm just going to fit the drive shaft first, and here I'm just making sure that there's some moly grease on the splines. I did have some footage of me cleaning and painting the swing arm, but for some reason that's went missing, so I'm afraid it's just watching me put the swing arm into the bike. And here I'm fitting the final drive housing. I just slide the splines onto the shaft and then 4 bolts onto the swing arm. Well friends, that's all I have for this episode. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget and give me a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. It really helps me out and it's very much appreciated. It gives me the motivation I need to keep hitting the record button. Hopefully you look after yourselves for the next couple of weeks until the next episode. I'm away to get the spuds on.